Hello Logic Pro users, Mike here, and in this video I'm going to show you 7 tips plus a really cool bonus tip so that you can control the velocity values in the piano roll editor in Logic Pro X. So let's dive in right now. Alright, so this is the short example I composed for this video. Right, now tip number 1 is using the velocity tool to change the dynamics. So you can either use it up here or you can simply hold down Command plus Ctrl, and then you simply see here the V here, so you can left click with your mouse, drag upwards or downwards. So you can of course use this on several notes like this to change all of them at the same time. Just select them, hold down Command Ctrl, left click, drag down or up. So that is tip number 1. Tip number 2 is if you want to set everything at the same velocity. Let's say you have this bass drum here. Well, you can select all of them first by clicking here, or of course dragging and selecting the notes. But let's say we want to select all these bass drum notes and you want them at the same velocity. So you want to use the velocity tool, which I just showed you is using Command Control. Then you simply left click here, and now while you left click you hold down the mouse and then Option or Alt plus Shift. Option Shift, and now if I drag down or up, so up now you can see everything is now the same velocity, 127 in this case. And then you can just use this slider while always selected and those will be the same. So again, you can always use the velocity tool up here. But since you can use this key command, which is Command plus Control, you don't really need it up here. You can actually use this as another tool, let's say the brush tool, which I like to use. So again, select the notes, velocity tool, bring it up, Control plus Command, then left click to select, Alt or Option plus Shift. Option Shift, and now while you hold those keys down and the left mouse button, drag down or up. So that's same velocity. Tip number 3, create straight dynamic rolls. So if you go in here and take a look at this epic kit here. What's that? That's crazy because the velocity is the same here. It doesn't sound good at all. So let's say you want to use this as a straight dynamic roll. Well, select the notes first, and then you simply left click and drag a line. So you can start here, left click, or let's start here in fact, and let's go down here. And you can also, if you want to, hold down Shift to make sure only those notes you selected are affected in this. So I hold down Shift and it works like that. So even if I start dragging right from here, hold down Shift now, and you will create that dynamic roll only on those selected notes, which now sound like this. So that's a straight dynamic roll. Now you can also create a crescendo or diminuendo. So let's see if I have, let's say you have some variation. So if you recorded this, you will get some variation, right? Like this. Let's just add some variation. Now, let's say you want to have that variation remain, but still, let's say you think this slope, this average slope crescendo is too small. Well, then you simply hold down Command while you do the same. And that means you are changing the average dynamics over time. So now you have a slight increase here. So holding down Command and dragging the line. If you have it at the same, it doesn't do anything. But if you just increase the slope, watch what happens now. You increase the average over time of this dynamics, creating that crescendo. And this will work, let's say, if you recorded something with pretty much an average similar dynamics, like this, and you say, well, you want that. So you have the variation, the human aspect, but you don't have the crescendo here. Well, just do the same here. Hold down command, left click, drag line, and make it a crescendo. And then if you think it's too much, you can select and drag down the velocity slider like this. Let's do it like so. So now you have a crescendo here. And of course, this works in the opposite way, so you can do a decrescendo. Just do the opposite. Command, left click, and drag the average dynamics you want the notes to have afterwards, like so. Now you have a decrescendo, which of course will not sound that good into starting here this track. So that's Crescendo-Diminuendo. Now, tip number 5 is to compress velocity. What do I mean? Well, let's go in here, have a look at everything, and you see this track here. And let's say you think the difference between the highest and lowest dynamics is too high. Well, if you select everything and then you go into MIDI automation, click A here to open this up so you see the velocity for each note. Just take one of these notes and drag it up or down. So compression is down. Now you see you're actually closing the gap. You see? You have still have the variation, but it's compressing it. And then afterwards, you can use this slider to drag everything up. So now you have variation, but it is less variation than you had in the beginning. And in the opposite way, if you want to expand the dynamic range, select everything, drag this upwards. You just have to make sure you don't hit the ceiling with any note, because then it will just stop, and that will, of course, compress there. So, and then you can drag everything down. Do it again like this. And now you have extreme dynamics range here. So let's go back to the first example like that. So that's tip number 5. Tip number 6 is max velocity. So again, let's say we have everything like so here, and now this note here is on 126. So let's say you think that everything above 115 is too high. Well then, go into functions, MIDI transform, and you actually have something called velocity limiter. And then here you set the range. So let's say 115 is the loudest hit you want. Select and operate. And now those loudest hits, this one for example, which previously was 126, is now 115. So this is a great way in case some hits are simply way too loud, instead of having to go in and reducing every hit velocity manually. And tip number 7 is humanize velocity. So let's say we create again these notes here at the same velocity. Okay, so again, what did we do? Well, everything here selected, and then velocity tool, which was command control. Click here, then hold down Option Shift and drag up or down, and you see now everything is same velocity. But let's say you have written in the notes manually in the piano roll, then of course every note will have different velocity. So select them, the notes you want to add a humanization aspect on, and then you go into functions, MIDI transform, humanize, and here you can see this will randomize position, velocity, and length. You can click here and pick through. That turns that off. That turns that off. So only velocity. Whoops. And this is how much of the humanization will add. So 10 meaning plus minus 10 in velocity. So starting at, let's say, if these are on 80, the notes can go from 70 to 90 in that range. So, which is, if I operate now, you can see the highest note became 89 and the lowest 72. So you can actually operate several times like this. But of course, every time it's a new starting point. So I would recommend setting it at what range you want in the beginning. So 15, and you can see Now you have some humanization factor on that. Now, as a bonus tip, I want to show you a really cool thing. So if you go into this track, this snare track here, creating rolls like this one. So this I actually manually recorded before this video, but let's say you want to create a snare roll by drawing into the MIDI or the piano roll directly. How do you do that? Well, you use the brush tool, which is this one here. You can simply, or you can add it by clicking T and then B. T, B changes the pointer tool to the brush tool. And then check up here. This note value here for the quantizing actually decides how long the notes will be that you draw in. So if you have this on 8, now if I drag here, those are 8 notes. Let's redo it. So let's say we want to do a 16th roll. And by the way, this velocity here also draws in how much the velocity will be, like that. Okay, so now you have this. Oh, let's... Okay, so this is super low velocity. Now, the really cool trick here is that you can create a roll with both the notes and the dynamics at the same time. So I recommend starting, setting the value here, 16th note, setting this at a very low setting at the starting point. And by the way, when you draw a roll, if you start here and then hold down Shift, then it will lock to this particular note. So if I do this now, watch what happens now. The thing that changes is the dynamics. So if you set it at a low setting first, like I did here. So, brush tool first, left click and hold, then while you hold, click down Shift, and then you drag, but don't drag straight, drag in a line upwards like this. And you see the color of these notes changes. And now when I release, that is because I actually added the dynamics and created a roll both with the note values, instead of having to draw each one in or copy and paste, and the dynamics. So I get this. Like that. And I mean, if you are not satisfied, let's TT to go to pointer tool. If you think it ramps up too high, you can still compress it downwards like this, because you obviously want to have the first hit here be louder for the accent. Okay, so I think these ones are still a bit too low because I can barely hear them. Anyway, you can also go in and actually draw in the roll, of course, afterwards, as I showed you, like this. Like this, straight roll, or with a command to remain the average differences. So that is the bonus tip. Draw a roll with MIDI using the brush tool, left click, and shift drag.